Good afternoon. I hope you had a good lunch. We start now with the afternoon session, and I'm very happy to receive here to Magda Sobon. Magda Sobon, she's one of the invited artists in this edition of the Biennial. She's an artist and professor at the Art Academy of Łódź in Poland.
Good afternoon, buon tarde. I will start my presentation. I would like to share about few things which are important for me and for my art. And behind me there will be a slideshow showing my works. And maybe I will start. And this, of course, is much more than I could bring here and show in my exhibition. So, as Lala already said, since more 20 years now, I am working with paper. I learned handmade paper during my studies at the Strzemiński Academy of Fine Arts in Łódź. In my professional life, I have a luck to combine my own interest also with my work. After graduation in 2002, I was employed as an assistant at the paper studio in my alma mater. I am working there now as a professor. The work that I have chosen for the exhibition links different narratives across time and space. The artworks were crystallized through my own experience. We can have different experiences, but we share the same feelings, and I'm searching for a universal language to tell about these feelings. This universal language is the language of matter, its structure and texture. Material is my means of expression. I search for different adequate forms of representation, means of artistic expression, including technique, although I work within the range of the same medium, handmade paper. Through the years, I learned to consciously handle the paper matter and master it. In various periods in my artistic work, I applied different strategies to enrich the language of my artistic expression, to find new possibility of the medium and ways of development. Although making sheets of handmade paper on the basic level is very simple, there are no simple answers, and the work required sometimes own invention and a lot of tests to obtain what we want to say. Creating for me is a mystery, but it also contains a surrogate of the answer about the meaning of existence. When it changes into a compulsion, it gives the feeling of unity in return, a unity which is not substantial, but at least intentional. This feeling of unity has much in common with the very act of creation, which for me begins with choosing appropriate fibers, exploring their possibilities and limits, looking for a way to use the material to the full, experimenting up to the point when the material becomes obedient and yields to my intentions. At this stage, practical skills are useful, yet creating handmade paper is not my goal, but only means by which an end is achieved. The long-lasting process of constructing subsequent object resembles meditation. The concentrated, subdued movement of the hands contribute to that. The process is long-lasting, but necessary. Along with it, I create an order within myself so as to incorporate some of that order in the work. I like to think that the cosmos is orderly, and we are a part of it. We are an element of the cosmos, an element as understood in Greek philosophy, a chemical element, a force of nature, the basic component. The cosmos begot us and is in us. The limits of the cosmos run within ourselves. Basic particles of chemical elements and even the lighter elements which construct the human body came into being in the very first minute after the Big Bang. Most probably, the synthesis took place inside some gigantic star, thus continuing the process of creation of the face of the world which we know. This knowledge fills me with inexplicable optimism. It is a guarantee of meaning, as even that ensures participation in the cosmic structure. The meaning does not necessarily imply understanding. It might be a matter of fate, but even fate requires justification. As confirmed by science, the material which composes me links me with the universe. I am connected with its beginnings. I was born of its law, I have involved, and the creation of the universe is my root cause. Without this source, my life, at least in the basic dimension, lacks justification. But I'm not free from dilemma. Perhaps it is a coincidence, and I am merely byproduct of necessity resulting from hidden parameters enforcing the absolute imperative of the history of the universe and the history of humankind. I depend on it to no lesser extent, on the history of humankind, its culture and civilization. They determine my life as strongly as the law of physics. The history of mankind has its source in the history of the universe, whose fate is inscribed in the history of humanity. Yet absorbing one's own culture is a process which shapes personality. It is accompanied by the ability to think about the world and one's own existence, to make choices and to search for meaning. This meaning is discovered through philosophical reflection or religion, as perhaps the universe is only an incident in the true existence. The existence of the universe and the existence of human beings are connected, but only the latter have a possibility to choose. They are not only actors, but also co-authors of the meaning. Nature realizes what has been imposed on it. At that point, I am less interested in the final explanation as to how I came to the earth than in the question about the meaning, about what for and why. I look for the answer in myself. Creating any... The important role in my art plays the structure and texture. Creating any orderly structure requires limitation. The more limitation, the more perfect the structure. The quantity of information it includes is the indicator of perfection. And so it is most important for me to define and abstract the most significant qualities of created object, such as the texture, structure, shape, and color from the knowledge I possess. I have to stop for a moment. So I'm sorry. To create the series of objects that compose the series that I call Beyond the Horizon, I started to construct the form from its middle, and I was in the center. Adding new fragments, I moved spiral towards its edges. I arrange it or place fragments prepared beforehand. I'm sorry, I want to stop this, but I don't know how. Yeah, and there is no pause. Yeah. Yeah, I will stop again. So I basically wanted to say something more. It's running. There is no more. Okay, never mind. I wanted to say something more about the objects that I have chosen for the exhibition, and that's why I wanted to stop a little bit. In the exhibition, you had the opportunity to see two of the works from the series Beyond the Horizon. And for those series, I invent my own way of constructing the forms, and I started creating in the middle, and I was in the center. Adding new fragments, I moved spiral towards its edges. I arranged or placed fragments prepared beforehand, one over the other, and thus I create a whole, a structure enclosed in the shape of circle. A circle is an exceptional form. It's an archetypal symbol. I use it as a synonym of primordial form, perfection, unity, and harmony. I also agree with Richard Long, for whom circles have belonged in some way or other to all people at all times. They are universal and timeless. For me as well, it is a part of the emotional appeal. Okay. This is the whole series. Another work that I am presenting in my exhibition comes from another series called About the Tears. And here I was using thread, and I immersed the thread into the pulp with kozo fibers. Kozo fibers is generally used for traditional handmade paper making in Japan. This paper is called washi. So kozo, of course, was previously dyed black. Performing a circular motion, I pull out the thread with what caught on it. This process resembled the stringing the beads onto a thread. The monotonous rhythm creates the space to concentrate the thoughts. The sound that accompanied the movement of the hands, the sound of water, act as a soothing music that brings the flow of the thoughts onto a different frequency. It allows to recognize new phenomena. The works represent the record of my thoughts and the movement of my hand. As I have said before, the traditional handmade paper making is only a base for further experiments. And I am also particularly drawn by the water lineage of paper. Paper born of water retains the code of its structure. Pulp bits remember where they came from. Paper carries the load of memory, similar to photography, yet on a different level, because paper in my works illustrate the process of its actual making. And in order to explain this, I would like to come back again and stop for a moment on these works that you had also opportunity to see. Oh, I'm talking about those. So the process of creating it was started when I saw one day children jumping on trampoline, wet with rainwater. It's occurred to me that trampoline can be a very useful utensil for making paper. Later, with further experiments and non-typical tool, I managed to execute images that remembered the energy that had accompanied flowing pulp and its shaping. I had known before I started experimenting what I wanted to obtain, but the result went beyond my broadest expectation. What was important in this process of creating is that I could only partly control it because I didn't see the right side of the image while working. After drying, when I reserved first work, almost photographic image of the way appeared to my eyes, as if the paper has a memory that it was born of water. And the last, I think, important thing in my art is that by giving up durable materials, I expose the ephemerality of my works. My works grow slow, as a slow pace like nature creation. They are also organic, and with the time, they will turn into dust. However, it is not the kind of art which determine the rhythm of changes, and the changes themselves become a part of the artistic strategy. I have chosen paper as my medium because working with something material is a cognitive process based on the sense of touch. Coming into contact with a material has a real and symbolic dimension. It brings the gift of comprehending it, and an individual gesture preserved in it becomes a medium of communication, allows energy to flow through the act of making. Thank you. I'm sorry for that, but yeah, it was good. Thank you.
Very good.
Should I tell you? No.
Yeah, the next one. I will try. And now we go to the next presentation. Another invited artist, Stephen Sheffield from Canada, with the presentation Body Membrane Vessel and Vehicle. We will see a video he has sent from Canada. Like that? Yes? Full screen.
Yes, I decided that I would talk about 12 different pieces that are all in different materials, but I'll deal with the idea of the membrane. The first one I would start with is Anne's Dream. It's a performance that I did in 1979 where we stretched a large sheet of tracing paper 10 yards by 10 yards, suspended it at hip level, and my friend Anne Lyons was attached to a rope that was wound around a central pole in the studio, and she just slowly started to cut with a pair of scissors a spiral through the paper until she did 4.5 turns and then came to the end and broke the scissors with 2 rocks. So it was partly based on a dream she had, but it was also partly based on the children's game Scissors, Rock, Paper. Skins for Members of Generation is a group of pieces I did with neoprene gloves, where I was really interested in the ability of the glove to act like an image of the body, the hand for the body, the glove for the body, and the idea of a prophylactic, where it's something that protects the body, but it also allows the body to come together. Consequently, I played with the idea of involuting and invaginating forms so that one piece would fit inside the other. A Raging Stream is called Violent, but not the riverbed that hems it in, is from a poem by Bertolt Brecht. It's another piece that I did when I was living in New York, and I was really struck by homeless people with children living in the subway system. I used sand and silk and polyester organza to make the pieces. the only structure inside them is in fact the relationship between the seams on the organza and the sand. Nothing else is holding them together. They're just sacks filled with sand, and that's where their form comes from, even though the arms can be cantilevered or leaping out from the body. Agate and rock are two of the three large glass pieces that I made, where I took large sheets of glass, had holes drilled into them so I could sew on plastic pockets. These pockets were then filled with cement fondue. And because the plastic is impermeable, the cement fondue took the brilliant surface of the plastic, and I could then peel back some of the plastic to expose highly polished cement forms. Rock, I used the same idea, but with zippers that I opened up, and so that the cement pieces that had set inside the plastic pockets, one could see the brilliant surface on them. Ecos de Système, which means they're talking about systems, is a kind of a portrait of a conversation between me and Michel Dagnot, my companion. Late at night, after we're too tired to continue working, we were talking about systems that run through art. And I decided to create a tension between fractal geometry and Archimedean geometry. I used Dupioni silk for the Archimedean geometry because of the way the woof and the weave work in the silk, and I used the polyester because it seeds so well in all directions for the fractal geometry. A Boy's Own Story is a group of pieces that I produced where I went back to figuration, a straightforward figuration rather than dealing with body parts. I dealt with the whole body, but I tried to go back to my youth as a child or as a young man, playing with the clothes that I had. I was very interested in the reversibility of clothes, or the ability, for instance, to pass your legs through a t-shirt, making one's underwear into a hat. So in this case, it was about clothing a body, about the size of a doll. So there's something at the same time, rather touching and slightly perverse about the whole experience. With Poisson-Terre, I was again interested in using the idea of clothing, but I wanted to develop the space between clothing and the body. So I had an image of my sister Anne, who always was trying to check to see whether she smelled of body odor, smelling inside her blouse. So her face is partially covered, and the dynamic space is the space between the body and the cloth. And the woman is putting her nose inside her blouse to smell what she smells like herself. The group of pieces, The Nose by de Gogol, really covers a range of different kinds of porosity. Some of the pieces are cement poured in silk organza, polyester organza, some in plastic. They're all very simple forms, the form of a nose, and what happens though is that with the different weaves and density of the silk and the polyester organza, sometimes the cement created a crust on the surface, which I found very interesting, where something goes through and stops on the barrier. The series of Debutada were all traced from the body of my companion Michel Dagnot, and that's what you see in this first image where we're making the pattern. I then blew up the pattern so it was much bigger and sewed his body out of recuperated cloth from his mother's house after she died. Green Man and Magenta Nugget are both made from a pattern for a head. In Green Man, what I wanted to do is to create the form of a tongue, and I blew up the head and the tongue at the same time at first, so the tongue is sticking out as you see in this first image. Then, when the head was completely dry, I re-wet the tongue and put the blower of the shop vac in the opposite direction so that it then became the throat. Because the cotton was a double-faced cotton with two colors, green and pink, one gets that sense of reversibility. In our magenta nugget, I worked a bit differently. Instead of just having the air pressure working against the cloth, creating the form, I had cords that ran through the body so that I could pull in the indents at the temples and again in the cheeks. Body membrane, vessel and vehicle. Membranes have been a major element in my work. At times I approach it as a figure, and at other times as an implement. Or to think of it differently, I use membranes as vessel and as a vehicle. I have been attracted to the membrane as a figure because it allows me to imagine and represent the body in terms of its fragility and resistance. A membrane can have varying degrees of porosity or completely impermeable. Curiously, my interest in membranes springs from my work with clay. Although we don't often think of clay in terms of membranes, only very small clay forms can be fired in the mass. All others have to be converted into empty vessels, even when they are sculptural forms. A ceramic object is almost always a wall surrounding an empty space. Whether it is wheelwork or modeled sculpture, I create forms from the inside out by nudging and cajoling the clay walls to take the form of the body. In some senses, working this way gives breath to the figures. When I started working with cloth, I realized how well it suited as a metaphor for the skin of the body. On the primary level, cloth mimics and doubles the skin of the body. However much we understand the bones and the muscles, it is the skin of our body and the bodies of others that we know best. And then only if we ever should venture beyond the first layer of clothing. Looking for a way of showing sculpture that was light and sharp, I started soaking cloth in sugar water and inflating the forms with the blower function of an industrial vacuum cleaner as an equivalent of working clay from the inside out and then firing the mutable clay into rigid ceramic. Of course, for the cloth pieces, I looked for something that is light and rigid that can be inflated, deflated, and inflated again in order to be portable. In this sense, these pieces are my answer to Marcel Duchamp's Boîte en valise. Although requiring a careful balance between water and sugar, the mixture can be adjusted to the weave, weight, and absorbency of the cloth, as well as to the volume of the work. I have also used water and rabbit skin glue to produce a different surface and a more brittle shell. The earlier, smaller pieces reflect my interest in the reversibility of clothing and of body parts. The shirts, for instance, one can take the lining of a jacket and reverse it on itself or blow up the lining at the same time as the jacket to produce an unexpected form. The glove pieces could take the digits and involute or invaginate the forms to evoke genitals and hands of the body. Prophylactics, like gloves and condoms, are membranes that protect the body and allow for the meeting of body parts. They act as a frontier, and those references are apparent in the glove series Members of Generation. The porosity of a membrane can also mean that it acts as a filter. Whether it's the sand and organza pieces that leave a trace as almost like a kind of a shadow of the body on the table below it, the sugar that accumulates on the surface of the blown sugar pieces, or cement that leaks through the organza to create a crust and partially or completely absorb the membrane and sit on its surface. One of the things I wanted to do with these sugar and cloth pieces is to avoid the softness of the form and the flaccid surface of inflatables, even though there is a link between my pieces and inflatable sculptures. I find that inflatable sculptures are more promise than product, more potential than output. I also like the sound of the shell of sugar on the fabric.
Just tap. Mm-hmm.
And now we go to the speed talks, short talks, 10 minutes each one. And there will be all of them will be videos. We start with Itandegui Castañeda, an artist from Mexico, Brazil. And she's going to talk about contemporary textile art potential in public and private space through autobiographical processes.
Oi, meu nome é Itandegui Castanheda de Mesa, sou artista visual. A continuação apresentarei um pouco do meu trabalho ao longo de 10 anos na área da arte têxtil. Minha primeira instalação de arte têxtil foi no 2010, com a instalação Vermelho, que foi parte da exposição coletiva Gracias Buen Viaje. Este é o modelo de estrutura básica para a realização de toda a instalação. Nessa instalação, iniciei a exploração das diferentes possibilidades que oferece a estrutura, como a cor vermelho e suas diferentes tonalidades, além de perceber como a estrutura cresce de um jeito muito orgânico, que se expandiu pelo espaço arquitetônico onde foi exibida a peça, no Museu da Cidade de Cuernavaca. Esta peça, que se chama Campo Expandido, foi realizada com a estrutura básica da técnica do crochê, com fios de algodão. Essa estrutura foi crescendo de um jeito orgânico, até formar uma grande rede, e o contorno me lembrava muito a espuma do mar. Então, iniciei a explorar as propriedades do material, como a flexibilidade que tem o tecido e como esta peça se adapta a diversos espaços, formas e dimensões, e porém pode expandir-se e comprimir-se ao mesmo tempo, dependendo do espaço e a proposta. Esta obra tem um peso aproximado de 2,5 kg, então também foi pensada para poder embalar facilmente e o transporte fique mais barato para a gente. Esta obra foi selecionada para a Bienal de Artes Visuais no 2016 pela Universidade Nacional Autônoma do México. Nesta exposição, a escultura têxtil se apresentou de um jeito diferente que a proposta inicial, o que quer dizer que a peça é flexível não só pelos materiais, mas também pelo momento e o espaço. No 2019, a obra de Campo Expandido participou em uma exposição coletiva de mulheres na arte têxtil no México. A exposição se chamou Entramando Laços, na Galeria do Centro das Artes de São Luís Potosí. Nas fotos da exposição, podemos perceber que nesta exposição teve uma curadoria diferente e, portanto, a obra de Campo Expandido se apresentou com fotos da obra e, ao mesmo tempo, se apresentou ao público de outro jeito. Esta obra é uma metamorfose constante. A série Entramados surge no 2018. É meu primeiro acercamento ao bordado artístico criativo. Esta série é parte de um projeto de pesquisa do mestrado em Arte e Cultura Visual. Nesta obra, trabalho a partir de uma série de painéis, pensados a partir de um olhar aéreo, onde inicio a refletir sobre os espaços públicos e privados nas grandes metrópoles. Isto surge a partir da leitura do livro da Raquel Ronil, A Guerra dos Lugares. A obra de Entramados participou da exposição que se chamou Loteamento, na Galeria da Faculdade de Artes Visuais da Universidade Federal de Goiás. A exposição tinha uma relação bem próxima da minha proposta, por como se dividem nas cidades. Então, na proposta desta exposição, de alguma forma foi mostrar os diferentes linguagens de vários artistas que se adaptaram a espaços impensáveis, além de ter uma diversidade de espaços onde a obra se apropria de lugares que podem se tornar de difícil acesso para o público. Uma das propriedades da obra Entramados é a flexibilidade dos formatos e, porém, esses se podem comprimir ou expandir no espaço. Pensar nas diversas possibilidades que tem uma obra é uma procura constante no meu fazer na arte têxtil. Esta obra foi parte da exposição de defesa de mestrado em Arte e Cultura Visual e foi parte de um projeto que foi desenvolvido ao longo de 2 anos e meio. Esta obra ainda continua evoluindo. Isto é parte do registro de como vai mudando a obra. Espero mais na frente mostrar para vocês por meio de minhas redes sociais que estarão disponíveis para vocês. O projeto Entre Nós iniciou na residência artística Canteiro, em 2019. Ali, iniciei a desenvolver a proposta com outros colegas. Iniciei a explorar as possibilidades da fotografia e o bordado, com o objetivo de visualizar como poderia ser a intervenção têxtil. Como vocês podem observar nas imagens, surgiram 3 propostas e a partir dali a gente decidiu qual era a proposta mais viável. Primeiro, realizei uma série de provas no espaço público que forma parte da Vila Cultural Cora Coralina, na cidade de Goiânia, Brasil. Isto para ver as possibilidades que tinha a proposta no exterior e também para ver como ficaria o tecido de malha no espaço. Foi uma experiência que amei, pois consegui por primeira vez na minha vida levar a arte têxtil a outros espaços que não havia tido a oportunidade de experimentar. Depois das provas realizadas, a gente pensou em convidar ao público para ser parte dessa intervenção têxtil. As pessoas que chegaram a participar desta atividade, de alguma forma foi uma surpresa para eles, pois se tem um conceito muito específico da arte têxtil como uma atividade passiva, mas nesta intervenção foi todo o contrário, pois o público participou na realização de uma obra efímera, além de precisar de um grande esforço físico e concentração. Penso que esta intervenção aproximou um pouco ao público a outra forma de fazer arte têxtil. A obra já finalizada ficou no espaço ao redor de 3 dias. A proposta inicial foi ficar 1 mês, mas no momento de desenvolver a proposta, não contemplei um fator muito importante, o clima. No mês que a gente realizou a intervenção, é uma época do ano que tem muita chuva na cidade, então o fio de malha caiu um pouco. Mas penso que esta intervenção me deixou muitas aprendizagens e cumpriu muitas das minhas expectativas. Uma delas foi sair de alguma forma do espaço fechado do museu para a proposta aproximar-se a outros públicos que transitam pelas ruas próximas da praça. O desmontagem da obra foi aproximadamente em 2 horas Isto gerou umas grandes bolas de fios. No momento, não consegui pensar em alguma outra possibilidade da obra, mas nestes dias surgiu a ideia de fazer alguma montagem com os fios que ficaram. Esta é outra possibilidade da obra entre nós. Gostaria de agradecer à Bienal Contextile 2020 pelo convite e a maravilhosa labor que fazem de difundir o trabalho da arte têxtil de diversas latitudes do mundo. Também quero agradecer a vocês pela escuta. Até mais!
Yes. The next presentation, Stitch in Time, by James Fox from the United Kingdom.
A stitch in time, reverse applique with freehand machine embroidery, 150 centimeters by 150 centimeters. 2020, James Fox. A work reflecting historical and contemporary aspects of imprisonment as social control, combining elements of its design, construction and effect on the lives of those within its system. The observation of society is not a modern phenomenon. This concept is evident in the Greek legend of Argos Panoptes, who had 100 eyes. Being constantly scrutinized by controlling figures of authority is a feature of many aspects of contemporary life. We live with the knowledge that we are, at least potentially, observed and recorded all the time. John Rye wrote in The Guardian in 1996. Jeremy Bentham, 1748 to 1832. Social theorist and philosopher. Bentham designed the Panopticon, a type of institutional building and a system of control. The concept of the design is to allow all prisoners of an institution to be observed by a single central guard, without the inmates being able to tell whether they are being watched or not. Michel Foucault, 1926 to 1984, a French intellectual and critic, expanded the idea of the Panopticon into a symbol of social control that extends into everyday life for all citizens, and not just for those in the prison system. Using the Panopticon idea as the basis of my investigations, I have produced a work that is structured around a design based on the Millbank prison. This is now the site of Tate Britain. This design comprised 6 pentagonal-shaped buildings with a central watchtower in each. The site was originally bought by Bentham with government money to build his Panopticon. This was abandoned in favour of Hardwicke's plan. My work uses Hardwicke's design as the foundation of the piece, which I have divided into 6 panels with 6 sections in each panel. At the centre of these panels there was originally a church in Hardwicke's drawing. I have replaced this with an image of Presidio Modella, a Cuban Panopticon prison modelled after the Stateville Correction Centre in Illinois, USA, which was based closely on the original idea of Bentham's Panopticon design. The Cuban prison complex, which comprised 5 Panopticon buildings, was built between 1926 and 1928. The prison became overcrowded and famed for its brutality before being shut down in 1966. In 1952, Fidel Castro spent 2 years in here with his brother. My work shows the inside of the dilapidated building as it is now. Around the central design are the 6 panels, each depicting different aspects associated with incarceration. 2 features recur as a motif: time and locks. Time is not just the measurement of existence, but has many different associations when it comes to prisoners and prison life. Locks and keys are intrinsic to incarceration. Life in prisons is organised by keys and doors, by locking in and letting out. The institution is run as a constantly renegotiated compromise between freedom and force. Keys not only have a symbolic meaning in prison, they are also part of the literal mechanism that keeps prisons operating, and if they are compromised, the system fails and has to be abandoned to begin the process over again. Within the centre of each divided panel on my work, there is a circular section depicting the peephole in prison doors. Once again, the Panopticon idea of constant surveillance comes into play. The watched being constantly aware that at any moment the watcher is looking and judging. The general public rarely gets to see inside the prison system. Little information is published on prisoners. It is one of the hidden regions of our social system, one of the dark zones of our lives. Foucault, criticaltheory.com. One of the peepholes show 2 men, partially glimpsed, there but hidden. Black men are 26% more likely than white men to be remanded in custody. They are also nearly 60% more likely to plead not guilty. Prison Reform Trust, 2020. My work, A Stitch in Time, also highlights some of the language used in prisons, allowing an insight into a world few people get to see. Prisoners will try to find ways and means of avoiding the observation that is potentially constant, to enable them to continue their own agenda. This can be done through secret codes, signs and language. Prison language has taken elements from various sources including Cockney rhyming slang, Hindi, Jamaican patois, Romani, and from many other origins. The language passing between convicts is used to hide information from authority, make quick transactions, create a feeling of solidarity, and even lighten the mood. For example, the term all night and a day can mean a life sentence till death. Another feature represented within my work is tattoos. Tattoos can be used to show membership of gangs and record the wearer's personal history. Certain designs have developed recognised coded meanings. The code systems can be quite complex, and because of the nature of what they encode, they are often not widely recognised. The acronyms ACAB, found on some people's knuckles, can mean either always carry a Bible or all coppers are bastards. 5 dots, sometimes known as the quinux, represents time done in prison. The 4 dots side represent the 4 walls, and the dot on the inside represents the prisoner. The 5 dots is an international prison tattoo. It is common amongst both American and European prisons. A Stitch in Time also has headline facts and figures from government policies implemented on the prison system in recent English history. For example, a self-inflicted death every 4 days. Ministry for Justice, 2019. Highlighting the rate of suicide in English prisons in 1 year. My work does not show any solutions to the problems faced by the prison system, but it is designed to draw attention to the realities of prison life. It seems obvious that change is desperately needed in reducing the number of people going to prisons. In investigating the data on the ethnicity and socio-economic backgrounds of prisoners, the conditions in the prisons themselves, and society's attitude to incarceration. In conclusion, Bentham's idea that a prison could be managed from a single vantage point has in some ways been realised with the use of CCTV and computer monitoring systems. However, his concrete plans for buildings that house people in a circular facility has proven to be disastrous, highlighted by the fact that there are no Panopticon prisons currently in use anywhere and that they were disliked by prisoners and prison officers alike. In 2011, the prison watchdog group, the John Howard Association, stated that the Stateville Correction Centre in Illinois seemed perfectly engineered to induce extreme aggravation, anxiety and stress among inmates and staff. Beyond the prison system, nowadays, Foucault's expanded theory of the Panopticon controlling all our social and work lives is with us every time we log on to the internet. We use social media platforms or walk in public areas where CCTV is used. Visibility is a trap. Foucault, 1975. The idea that we are all potentially being observed at any time may be the influence that is designed to force us into self-regulation. This could be the ultimate control by a single central guard.
And now the next presentation in the program, you have the artist from Taiwan, Pejonen, but unfortunately she has not been able to send the presentation. So we jump to the next one, which is a presentation by Greta Kardisiute from Lithuania, The Places I've Touched.
No. Unfortunately, we do not have the file here, so we must to go forward and present the next one.
We don't have the two next ones, because after Greta it should be Nika, and I don't see it here. So the next one is Shelly.
Maybe we can do a 5 minutes break because we have some technical issues here. We solve it in 5 minutes if you'd be so kind, okay? Thank you.
So now we have the presentation by We Found It, by Greta Kardisiuti from Lithuania, The Places I Touched.
I'm an artist, Greta Kardi from Lithuania. I'm a Master of Visual Arts at Vilnius Academy of Fine Arts in Lithuania. I participate in exhibitions with land art installations, textile artworks since 1999. At the same time, I am a professional graphic designer. My field of research connects various substances and transfers the idea of textile into another scope like land art, other experimentation, or urban art. You can see this in the slides. Here I would like to present you my report, The Places That I Touched. This is the first time I will read a report of this kind at a conference, and I am about to reflect to the theme of this Biennale, that is places of memory. This topic excites me because I create textile and art that is relevant to the theme and is site-specific. If there is a possibility to choose the place where I am about to install my work, I choose it carefully, taking into account various nuances. On the other hand, it happens that the location is indicated by the organizers sometimes, and they have to incorporate my work into localities to make it look good. Most of my installations are outdoors. I create my installations in a few weeks normally. I am getting connected to the places where I create. They tend to become very familiar to me. One of such places is Centro Cultural Vila Flor in Guimarães, Portugal, where I install the work Knitted Found Art in 2018 at Biennale Contextile 18. Maybe you remember this work. You can see this in the slides. I created this piece in 2 weeks, and I never forgot this place. The places where I install my works become places of remembrance for myself and me, all down to the last detail. Very interesting place is the Panika Forest, which is located near the town of Muzzana in Italy. It looks like the place itself told me the title of the work, that is Two Shores Found Art. I knitted this textile and art in 2017 at Art Festival Lupanica 17. Because the initial idea was to install the work on a hill, but then I come to this area and choose a place for the work together with the curator of the exhibition, I decided to challenge myself and choose a more complicated but at the same time more interesting place for installation. There in Panika Forest we have two shores of the small river that are suitable in a perfect way to show layers of time. They reflect each other too. I would also like to tell about Vilnius Botanical Garden in this report, where I have installed 4 of my works in 3 years in a row starting 2014 and 1 after a year of break. I have installed 2 different works in the same place. You can see this in the slides. What's interesting, the same area with different pieces looked different. In 2019, I was challenged by invitation to participate and create in a textile art exhibition together with Japanese artists in exhibition Deep Rivers Flow Silently in Kaunas, Lithuania. I installed my work that reminiscence a stable field and a gray foam boards that were serving as a concrete imitation. That was new for me, and the experimentation succeeded, and my work lasted longer than the exhibition itself. You can see this in the slides. I would like to end this report by presenting a work that is very precious for me, the location of which is very special for the history of my country. In 2018, I created an artwork touching land. This piece was presented in a Šiluva Biennale Art Symposium in 2019. This piece depicts stylized bird, a symbol of the Holy Spirit, adorned with fish-like ornaments. All that was knitted with wooden sticks. The environment itself suggests this theme, as this piece of land art is very close to the site where Pope John Paul II arrived in a helicopter in 1993. Creating of the work was long meditative contact with the land. For me, creation is like adoration touching the silence, the higher purity. This small town, Šiluva, a Lithuanian Fatima, is a place of apparition of our Blessed Mother. I would like to present a short video of the creation touching land. For the last 6 years, I have been immersed in the arts of the land, embroidering meadows and hills with wooden sticks. My works have a fixed time of their existence. Later, they remain in the photos, in the catalogs, just like the people who was important to me and who left this world. I am very attached, maybe even too much, so this kind of creation heals me. In 2014, I lost one of most precious people for me, my father. So land art, which is temporary art, still helps me to understand that. You create and you must detach yourself from your work. leave all to the nature to create, knowing that their work will inevitably perish.
Okay, next is a joint presentation by artists Nika Timaskova and Hannah Kindler. One is from Switzerland and the other one is from Germany. The title is Soft Violence in Mimicry, Textile Histories of the Past and the Future.
One at Contextile and also via live stream from everywhere.
We are Nika Timashkova
and Hannah Kindler.
We come from Switzerland
and from Germany. And we want to thank you that we have the possibility to talk here to you today. Unfortunately, we can't be there in person. We would have loved to meet you all, but due to the corona situation, we are not able to come. So we send our warm greetings and we want to present our talk now.
Today, we want to give you a small insight into our artistic long-term research about the printing industry which developed in the 18th century in Europe. In our research, we highlight specific cases of Switzerland, Baden in southern Germany, and Alsace in France, and their ecological, social, and economical entanglements, which go far beyond the region. The research resulted in the exhibition Soft Violence in Mimicry, which was on view in November 2019 at Galerie für Gegenwartskunst, E-Werk, Freiburg, Germany. We would like to present you a small glimpse into both the historical background of our research as well as our artistic investigation in the exhibition. In the beginning of the 17th century, the first brightly colored, finely patterned and washable cotton fabrics from India entered the European market. These textiles were either called toile peintre, after the technique of painting on fabric, or indienne, after the country of origin, and they caused euphoria in Europe as no one had seen anything like this before. After the first hand-printed cotton textiles arrived at the European market, Swiss traders, together with German neighbors, set off to India and Indonesia in order to acquire the secret of their production. They brought back patterns, which they patented and reproduced in printing factories for the export. The first factories for printed fabrics opened in Europe, first in southern France and later in Germany and Switzerland. This new industry imitated fabrics from Asia in order to export these cheaply produced fabrics back there. The European imitations were also called indiennes or toile peintre, although the quality and the motifs were different. These machine-printed imitations influenced the Asian as well as the European market, and the meaning of the patterns shifted. Patterns which had been inspired by motifs from Asia were adapted to the European taste. The boundaries between original and fake started to blur.
In the center of the exhibition, Soft Violence and Mimicry, is the work Migrations, which is picking up the question of appropriation and imitation, original and fake. It is a tent with two openings. From the outside, it is made from plastic tarpaulins. It references not only provisional housings made by migrants, but also the bales used in the international textile trade. Inside the tent, patterns appear which come from different contexts. Some are original batik fabrics or original indienne from the 18th century. Others are imitations of printed textiles from Europe and Asia. In addition, there are historical imitations, which now serve as original templates for further imitations. There are, for example, several textiles with the bird motif on it. One shows the Indonesian Garuda bird sitting on a branch. When the French brought the pattern back home, they adapted it to the local taste, and this pattern became a sparrow sitting on a rose. However, the link to the Indonesian pattern is hardly ever made. Usually, the sparrow pattern is considered as the original. Through the placement of the two fabrics in one context, the interconnectedness between the two is highlighted. The work combines patterns in such a way that it seems as if they travel through the tent from one piece of cloth to another. The installation also includes patterns printed on paper, which are carefully attached on top of the fabric in order to create the illusion that one pattern transforms into the next. Confusion is generated when the reproduction mimics the original and the other way around. The word mimicry also appears in the title of the exhibition, and it is borrowed from Homi K. Baba. He understands mimicry as a camouflage in which the culture and the behavior of the colonizer is imitated by the colonized. Baba highlights that copying does not create the same image, but always a deviation. In this way, the imitation has the power of subversion and the possibility to reproject the look of the colonizer onto himself. The concept of imitation is used not only in our material, but it also becomes an approach of working in order to deal with the historical research.
Another example for motifs which change their meaning and questions the originality is the Glana Türchli, a square cotton scarf from Switzerland which was dyed with turkey red using the so-called mother plant and decorated with paisley patterns. The patterns were brought from Indonesia to Switzerland by the tradesman Konrad Blumer in the 1840s and replicated in his Swiss factory. The machine-printed Glana Türchli were not only worn in Switzerland, but were exported back to Indonesia, where they replaced the local and hand-printed items due to their lower price. Until today, the company Blumer AG continues to produce the Glana Türchli, which is a popular souvenir as it is seen as an authentic Swiss item. However, today in turn it has to compete with imitations from China, which put into question its originality. In the installation Global Glana, originality gets dissolved. The visitor sees 9 different red scarves and their packages. One is from Switzerland and the rest comes from China. Out of these, only the Glana Türchli claims the status of the original through a label, although all of them actually have the same design. Another dissolution takes place in the work Embodied patterns. The series of drawings shows faceless bodies of workers melting together with patterns and machines that they are operating. As a consequence, it is impossible to draw a boundary between the human body and the machine, the hand producing the pattern and the textile product. The work deals with the question of the human body in the textile production and how labor alters it. It not only refers to working conditions of the people of the 18th and 19th century Europe, but also recalls the working conditions of today's textile industry, which shows similarities. In the 18th century, textile workers who came to Basel from southern Germany or from Alsace were not allowed to change their working place or to move to another city because they did not possess the Swiss citizenship. They were extremely exploited and worked in slave-like conditions as they were fully exposed to the mood of the company owners, who usually did not pay any insurance and could fire them at any time. The red color in the drawings, which refers to the turkey red dye, is present not only in Embodied pattern and Global Glana, but also in all of the other works. The history of the mother plant is also addressed in the next work.
The Werk, die ökonomischen Charaktermasken, sind nur die Personifikationen der ökonomischen Verhältnisse. In English, the economic character masks are only the personifications of the economic relations, is referring to the economic theory of Karl Marx, in which he stated that there are items which represent, as the title says, the economic conditions of the free market environment. In this installation, there are 3 items: a madder plant, the alizarin powder, and aspirin placed on black pedestals. At the beginning, the madder root was used to produce the turkey red. However, after 1869, the alizarin, a synthetic reproduction of the natural color, replaced the madder plant. The pharmaceutical industry emerged from the declining textile industry in the 19th century because for synthetic dyes one had already the knowledge about chemical processes. Until today, the pharmaceutical companies are not only shaping the city of Basel and Alsace in a visual but also in an economical sense. Their location at both sides of the River Rhine reminds us of the former textile industry, which depended on running water for its coloring process. The last work of the exhibition is called Hyperethno-Wanderers, and it is a suggestion on how we can navigate and deal with the violent appropriations in the past textile industry, which are in place today, but which created the Eurocentric understanding of knowledge. Hyperethno-Wanderers is highly influenced by drag culture, in which items belonging to one particular culture are reappropriated, twisted, and combined together in order to question the borders of identity, gender, culture, and so on. Patterns which were used throughout the exhibition are repeated in the photographic portraits of the 5 characters, which are called the Hyperethno-Wanderers. They are textile ghosts from the future, showing ways of getting inspired by different cultures in a non-exploitative fashion. Guided by decolonial theory, the research within soft violence and mimicry examines question of cultural identity, appropriation, imitation, originality, power relations, and exploitation. In our artistic work, we investigate methods of telling stories of otherness, about local and global textile histories, and reconsidering the immanent power relations. One point of departure for our thinking was Homi K. Bhaba's concept of mimicry, which investigates the ambivalence in identity formation in colonial discourse. However, copying does not create the same image, but gives the chance for new constructions and therefore creates an opening for subversion. Thank you.
And next we have the presentation by Shelly Goldsmith from the United Kingdom. And you can see she has changed the title of the presentation. It's like you see on the screen, Locus of the Dress, a transitional place.
Talk about the ongoing project Locus of the Dress, which focuses on the dress as a dynamic space and links location on the planet with location on and within a garment. For a long time I've been concerned with exploring the fine veneer of cloth that stands between us and the world. Our clothes can be viewed as objects that accompany our lives, travelling with us as we move through life, a witness to our experiences, a place where memory and matter is deposited, a place we inhabit as home, physically and metaphorically. The project Locus of the Dress explores the imprint of our lives on the garments we wear and the transition of our sense of self taking place within the garment over time. This body of work explores concept as much as process, especially hand and digital dye sublimation. My aim is to use clothing, a universal object, as an entry point to explore and present complex ideas pertaining to human experience, and as a vehicle to stimulate curiosity, understanding, and growth in personality psychology. The project starts with two key elements: the dress form and a fascination with Julian Rotter's 1954 hypothesis that we all exist on a line between internal or external locus of control, and that this gives a strong indication of our sense of self. Rotter says a person's locus being Latin for place or location, is conceptualised as either internal, a belief that one can control one's own life, or external, a belief that life is controlled by external factors which the person cannot influence, or that chance or fate controls their life. Through a process of personal psychoanalysis, I understood the significance and impact of knowing where I sat on the locus of control scale. As with much of my work, in this investigation, I take an auto-ethnographic approach where I draw upon personal experience, but present ideas and questions that are relevant to us all. The project was initiated by a series of conversations at the Maudsley Hospital in London with Dr. Herminia Hernandez-Sanders, who collaborated on the project. The Maudsley is the largest mental health training institute in the UK, the Institute of Psychiatry at King's College Hospital, London, where Herminia is head of clinical teams. I worked with Herminia to identify the core qualities of the theory and establish a range of conceptual and visual markers to define the internal as distinct from the external locus. The concept is set within personality psychology, and in principle locates every individual at some point on the scale between external and internal, but nobody lives at the extremes. One's position is not static. Life experience and personal growth can affect movement between the poles, and an individual's forecasting of their own future is key to where they place themselves. Rotter says we generally start our life with an external locus of control. The aim is to move to an internal locus, where we take responsibility, have autonomy and well-being. I've identified and examined the two surfaces of the dress form, outside and inside, as independent landscapes to discuss and play out narratives of the external and internal hallmarks of Rotter's theory. I view the dress as having two landscapes, distinct zones of psychogeography, boundaried by different parts of our existence and psyche. The external surface of the dress, outward facing, a barrier to the world, is often a fine armour, signified visually by aspects such as frills, top stitching, embroidery, buttons and bows. The internal, an intimate space, where fabric touches flesh, mixes with sweat and skin cells, is often a landscape with raw or overlocked seams, loose threads, care labels, pocket flaps, facings and shoulder pads. Two geographical locations were chosen for their appropriate characteristics and their ability to embody the qualities of the two poles of Rotter's theory. Cincinnati and surrounding towns in Ohio, USA, is used to conjure the external locus. The internal is represented by the Phoenician coast of Margate and Ramsgate in East Kent, UK. Known as Tornado Alley, fraught with uncertainty due to its extreme meteorology, Ohio experiences high incidence of tornadoes. My parents moved from the UK to this area of the States over 30 years ago. Research at Ohio's libraries yielded photographs of its infamous 1974 super outbreak, the biggest tornado incident ever recorded, where 148 tornadoes were charted over the 2-day outbreak, and a frightening 10 tornadoes all on the ground all at once in the Cincinnati area. I gained permission to draw from 2 community photographs that were taken at the height of the tornadoes in Cincinnati. Rotter says, those with a strong external locus feel their life outcomes are outside their control, that life's events are determined by fate. They have a reliance on external factors such as lucky charms and superstitions. To establish the internal imagery, I walked to the Phoenician coast where I now live, photographically recording the changing tides, especially at the Walpole Bay tidal pool in Margate. I moved out of central London after the 2005 terrorist bombings played out in front of my home. Walking the coast now, the negative ions, promotes good health and well-being, key to the internal locus. And the tides, so predictable, I could look them up in a handbook or even get an app for my phone. Rotter says, those with a strong internal locus believe hard work leads to positive outcomes. They tend to take responsibility for their actions when things go well and even when they don't. Rotter describes how the external loci is often associated with the early and immature life. There's a series of Cincinnati drawings, drawn and redrawn over and over again on a series of fragments cut from girls' dresses. I'm also drawing my mother's jewellery, in keeping with the theory. Some were gifted to me as she left the UK, or passed to me as lucky omens or good luck charms, and recently I drew her charm bracelet over FaceTime. In some of the work, the lucky charms are sewn into the piece. But always the surface of the garment in these works is laden with graphite, oppressive, heavy with matter, and so much so that it is often leaking off the surface of the garment and onto the gallery floor. Some fragments cut from the dress are very small. You have to look very closely to see that some of the experience has rubbed off onto the cloth. Some dresses are divided. Some are unpicked and laid bare. Although ideas-based, this work is strongly crafted and presented in a fine art context to elicit personal reflection, to provoke curiosity and growth. Here's a shot from the solo exhibition drawn to Ohio at the Rochester Gallery, UK. There has been a series of exhibitions, articles and seminar papers. Individual pieces have been shown internationally, but the body of work has never been shown altogether, and so I've been working on a series of digital presentations of more immersive installations to propose for an exhibition. Sometimes the poles of theory sit side by side. Sometimes they are seen alone. The visual qualities of the internal loci shift to full colour. Fusing the image of the dress with the coastal image, an imprint of experience and place has been an important element of this work. But here it's all about what is left behind, an imprint, and feels like the shedding of a skin. I've worked experimentally with the dye sublimation process, where I've literally pressed the dress onto the still wet, digitally printed dyed surface to remove or subtract dye. So here, I've pressed the worn garment onto the still wet, digitally printed coastal photograph. The process leaves a negative image of the inside of the dress, almost akin to a photograph. The last phase of the work, Dresses for Giants, is a reinvention and retelling of 1970s polyester wedding dresses purchased in Cincinnati. Large in scale, they refer to the personalities of the women who may have worn these dresses, not their size. These express the ultimate stage of Rotter's theory, as they move location from Ohio to Kent, and the internal space transforms. Here I am looking at the inside landscape of the dress, but also looking deeper within it. I've worked with a manual process where dyed dresses are used as objects to print with, creating analogue prints that have near photographic images. This final stage of investigation also acts to stimulate curiosity and understanding around textile and fashion consumption by the reinvention and reuse of existing polyester dresses as a way to create poetic and provocative outcomes. I'm committed to diverting man-made fabric destined for landfill, reusing, adapting and reappropriating polyesters. I'd like to leave you with a quote from Daniel Dimitriou's review of Mina Pejonen's exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Art Tokyo. He talks about a donated dress displayed in glass, black with white tulips, with an accompanying text. The story of the dress describes how it was worn for 14 years, including the moment the wearer said goodbye to her dying mother, but also en route to the hospital to give birth to her child. What a great example of living life wearing a dress, a dynamic space for collecting experience, matter and emotion, growing up, growing old and transition.
Yes, we have the conversation.
I will do it.
I think I'm leaving in 10 minutes.
You just say goodbye.
So now we have time for the discussion. If you want questions, comments. If you I think if you have a comment for one of the artists who are not here, you can send it to us, and we will send it to the artist, and we will see if she answers by mail, or maybe we organize something in YouTube, or we will see. But if you have a question, please send it to us for somebody who is not here, okay? So, any questions? If you have a question, any question for me, for myself, I have to leave in 10 minutes, so do it now, because I have a flight to take this tonight. Thank you.
This is not work? Yes, it is. Laura, unfortunately, will leave us because she has a flight in a few hours. I want to thank you in the name of Contextile 2020 for being here with us. You are always a precious presence for us. Thank you so much. I think she deserves a big clap. Thank you. When you must leave, you just leave. Now,
I want to say something. No, I think thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm happy to be here again. It's me who thank you and all the team for organization of Contextile once more.
Now we will have some time to make an informal talk, if you want, among the artists who are here and did their presentations. We still have with us Magda Sobon, Inês Jorge, and also Janice Jeffries. If there is any questions, please feel comfortable for that. If you do not have any question, as Lala said, you can also send the comments or the topics or the questions for the email emergentes.gmail.com. You will find this email address in our website. I just want to make to leave a comment. We heard a lot during whole this day. We have a lot to think, to reflect, and to digest. It's a lot of information. We talked about time. We talked about places. We talked about pasts and future, inside, outside landscapes, materiality and substance in chaos and order. We talked about body, embodied, and mind. We also talk about public and private landscapes and spaces. And we talked about the biennial itself. It is so good to see the biennial is already a subject for scientific research. Tomorrow we will continue with these talks and reflections. And the program for today, if you are available to, it is now at 6:30. We will have the presentation of the artwork from Joana Finchfaria and Roma Stuckenberg in Fraterna Tanks. It's number 4 of your program. And then at 9:30, we will have the cinema in open air. You can see all of this in our program. Thank you so much for today. Now you can have another coffee break and maybe to do some network among you. Thank you so much.